Hello and welcome to today's webinar, Why Hydrogen and Fuel Cells Make Sense for Commercial Transportation. This webinar is co-hosted by Advanced Clean Tech News, or ACT News, and the California Hydrogen Business Council, also called CHPC. I'm Emmanuel Wagner, Deputy Director at the CHPC, and I'm very pleased to moderate today's webinar, and I hope this will be highly informative to you. First, I would like to introduce our panelists, who each bring a very diverse perspective to the challenges and opportunities for hydrogen fuel cell technology in the maritime freight industry. First up, we have Corey Shoemaker, a development specialist at the CHPC. Today, Corey will share some of the key findings from CHPC's newly released Hydrogen and Fuel Cells for Freight workshop report. Next up will be Jacob Goldberg, an environmental specialist at the Port of Los Angeles, and Jacob will provide an update on the port's current demonstration project featuring hydrogen and fuel cell technology. Next up, Bill Zobel, the General Manager of Business Development and Marketing at Trillium, and he will discuss the opportunities and challenges with hydrogen fueling infrastructure, as well as Trillium's experience with supporting fleets deploying hydrogen fuel cell vehicles. And last up, we will hear from Tony Williamson, the Director of Compliance and Sustainability at Total Transportation Services, Inc., or TTSI. Tony will provide first-hand experience operating hydrogen fuel cell Class 8 trucks. So before we start, just a brief slide here on housekeeping issues. You should already be able to hear me and see the webinar screen. If you hear echoes or your sound quality is bad, we welcome you to use the audio functions in the GoToWebinar toolbar, which should be at the right side of your screen. We will have at the end of the webinar a 15-minute Q&A session, and I encourage you to submit questions by using the Q&A box located in the upper right-hand corner of your screen. Please direct your questions to the organizer. Some of the information that you will hear today is quite technical, so we invite you to also watch the webinar again. The webinar recording will be made available by the end of the week. And at the end of the webinar, before you close your browser, we welcome you to also complete a quick 30-second survey. Your feedback is truly appreciated and is one of the ways to make this webinar experience better in future iterations. For any technical issues or assistance during the webinar, we invite you to contact Celeste Griffey at the email address that you can see on the screen or the phone number that's on here as well. So with that, just a really brief overview of the CHPC, the co-host of this webinar. The CHPC's mission and activities: we are a membership trade association advocating for the use of hydrogen and fuel cells in California. We're heavily focused on advocacy as well as sector developments for fuel cells and hydrogen, as California is the ground zero for many hydrogen-related activities in the United States. Therefore, we target the expansion of the hydrogen infrastructure network for light-duty vehicles, to develop infrastructure for medium and heavy-duty trucks and transit buses. We also seek to create more opportunities for hydrogen to play a role in port setting, freight, and off-road goods movement, and to help cost-effectively use curtailed electricity for energy storage with hydrogen and to decarbonize the gas grid. The CHPC has over 100 members that you can see on the next slide, and they represent all aspects and sectors of this industry. In order to get a sense of our members, you see the logos on the left, and you can see who they represent specifically on the right. Literally everybody that, we have a company or organization from each one of the sectors here. And with that said, I welcome you to explore more and learn more about the CHPC after the webinar. But for now, I'm excited to turn over the controls to Corey Shoemaker of the CHPC for his presentation. Corey, the audience is yours to wow.
Thank you, Emmanuel. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you fantastic.
My name is Corey Shoemaker. I'm the development specialist for the California Hydrogen Business Council, and I'm here to go over the report that we produced on a workshop featuring hydrogen fuel cells for freight. Next slide. So to paint a picture of why we put this workshop on, we have been doing this for 3 years because right now in California, specifically Southern California, it's a critical time to tackle air pollution, ozone, and criteria pollutants that are in the Los Angeles area. A lot of this is from transportation. In fact, 41% of California's total greenhouse gas emissions are from transportation. And a lot of that transportation is actually freight. And global freight emissions are expected to double by 2050. So back in 2006, the ports of Los Angeles and Long Beach decided to come together to form the Clean Air Action Plan. And most recently in 2017, on the update, they put in a goal to reach zero emission trucks in the ports by 2035. So we decided to put on this workshop to educate the various stakeholders involved in that process and to assist in getting to this goal. Next slide. In a broader context, recently, the International Energy Agency released a report in June on the future of hydrogen and talking about seizing today's opportunities. It's interesting to note that the report finds that today is an unprecedented time in the hydrogen economy and that there are more projects than ever before around the world. More political momentum and business momentum is happening with a number of policies that are hitting the landscape. And the IEA identified 4 near-term opportunities to boost hydrogen on the path towards its clean, widespread use. And the 2 that relate to freight are expanding hydrogen and transport through fleets, freight, and corridors, and to make industrial ports like Los Angeles and Long Beach the nerve centers of scaling up the use of clean hydrogen. If you look at the bottom right graphic, it's a small map of the Earth. It's a heat map showing the price of hydrogen, where the redder the color, the cheaper the hydrogen, and this is hydrogen produced from wind and solar to electrolysis as projected into the future. And you can see that California in the Southwest is a hot spot. And so the future potential of clean, cheap, renewable hydrogen is right where we are in California. Next slide. So at the workshop, we first wanted to paint a picture of the societal need for hydrogen fuel cells by featuring the environmental justice community, which focuses on improving the air quality within disadvantaged communities that are subject to disproportionate impact from the burden that is put on them from the commerce that happens by moving the containers from the ports of LA and Long Beach up to the rail yards in the downtown Los Angeles area. In fact, the majority of the goods that come into the United States actually pass through this freight corridor. So what this does is this puts a disproportionate burden on these communities and creates environmental hazards and makes them a significant target for the criteria pollutants. So the environmental justice community holds significant influence in California. You'll see a number of California Air Resource Board measures targeting these specific communities to improve their air quality, and they act as a gatekeeper to climate and quality policy. It's interesting to note that Southern California is on track to be non-compliant with the federal EPA NOx standards and has the worst ozone and 5th worst particulate matter pollution in the United States. Next slide. So we wanted to get a one-for-one technology platform comparison between battery electric and fuel cell electric, and the specific application that we chose to show this are fuel cell forklifts because they're the most commercially viable. In fact, in the United States, it was just confirmed by Plug Power that there are over 27,000 fuel cell forklifts in operation with an accumulated run time of over 200 million hours of operation. So looking closer into the business of material handling, 77% of operational costs come from labor, and only 11% actually come from equipment. And when you switch to hydrogen fuel cell forklifts in a facility that has at least 200 vehicles, the capital cost of putting in a hydrogen infrastructure is actually lower than outfitting it with fast chargers. And also, you don't have to use viable warehouse space to house those chargers because the fueling infrastructure is quite small. And unlike a battery, a fuel cell forklift can maintain consistent power throughout a shift by maintaining the constant voltage. So therefore, you don't see any sluggishness when you're trying to pull freight at the end of a shift. And looking at specific savings between fuel cell forklifts and battery forklifts, there's 4 to 6% labor savings, there's 6 to 15% productivity increase, and 10 to 30% added enterprise value per year. So when comparing forklifts with an internal combustion engine, a battery, and a fuel cell, the fuel cell is the only technology that checks all the boxes of fast refueling, high performance, productivity, space utilization, and total cost of ownership, all with zero emissions. Next slide. So it's very important at this workshop that we heard from OEMs, especially in the coming years, because the California Air Resources Board is going to begin to require a percentage of sales of Class 2 through 8 trucks to be zero emission. I believe this will begin in 2024. So we wanted to hear from the OEMs and what they're doing to prepare for this. Specifically, Toyota has been committed to advancing zero-emission vehicles, specifically fuel cell electric trucks. With its project portal that launched in 2017, it has since moved over 10,000 miles of freight. And the most recent version of this vehicle, it can reach over 200 miles in port drayage operations. Given the promise of cheaper renewable hydrogen in the future, the cost of operating a fuel cell electric truck is projected to be lower than a conventional diesel truck, as repair and maintenance costs are low for a fuel cell electric truck. Next slide. Hyundai is also looking to do a similar large-scale fuel cell electric truck project in California. And Japan and Korea are implementing aggressive plans to become hydrogen societies. Hyundai is advancing its fuel cell technology across all transportation sectors, including medium and heavy duty, with plans to produce 700,000 fuel cell systems by 2030, including Class 2 through 8 trucks and buses. A very interesting project happening in Switzerland is the deployment of 1,600 35-ton trucks named Exient by 2025, each with a range of 250 miles and a refueling time of no more than 15 minutes. At the workshop, we also heard from Nikola, who has received 13,000 orders for their fuel cell electric truck named Nikola 2. Nikola and Nel have partnered to build a network of 700 hydrogen stations across the United States by 2028. And they have developed a hydrogen station testing apparatus to test and validate their hydrogen stations. Interestingly enough, the first Nikola Nel station will actually be built in Southern California, producing 8 tons of hydrogen per day. Next slide. So one of the most important pieces of this workshop was to actually hear from the end user, and that was something that we wanted to make sure that we had. So there's no one better than Total Transportation Services Incorporated to talk about their experience with fuel cell electric trucks. Over the years, they've been testing a variety of fuel cell electric trucks in their trucking operations in the field. So we have direct operator experience to hear from. Right now, they have a few trucks, which you'll hear more about from Tony, and they will have up to 10 by the end of the year, and their total fleet is about 225 trucks. They are refueling these trucks with 2 mobile refuelers located near the Port of Long Beach, each with a capacity of about 300 kilograms, and they're very interested in getting a hydrogen station in the Inland Empire, which will allow them to operate the fuel cell trucks between the ports and the Inland Empire, the interior LA County basin, where a large percentage of their freight goes. Next slide. So you can't have vehicles without infrastructure. So talking about infrastructure was another important piece of this workshop. We heard from Hydrogenics and Air Liquide on their large-scale renewable hydrogen production facility from 5 megawatts of electrolysis that will produce 4,000 kilograms of hydrogen per day. That is enough for 100 fuel cell electric trucks. This design is scalable up to 40 megawatts of electrolysis to produce 17,000 kilograms a day. It's interesting that the Air Liquide model is hub and spoke. So they have hydrogen production and distribution starting from liquefaction. And then the liquid hydrogen tankers are moved to a distribution hub where the liquid hydrogen is vaporized into gaseous hydrogen and distributed to the station. The liquid hydrogen tanker can actually move up to 3,500 kilograms of hydrogen. One of the most recent developments was an MOU between Nel, Air Liquide, Hyundai, Nikola Motor, and Shell on hydrogen fueling components, specifically to develop standards for high flow nozzles for heavy duty trucks. The target is to fill a heavy duty fuel cell electric truck in 12 minutes or less. Shell will actually use Nel electrolyzers to produce hydrogen on site to test fuel cell electric trucks in the Los Angeles area for Nikola. And the lessons learned from the successful deployment of fuel cell electric buses and their infrastructure can be applied to heavy duty fuel cell electric trucks to assist in deployment. Next slide. So to wrap this up, and give you some conclusions and takeaways from the report, we really wanted to harp on the importance of the environmental justice groups and their continued engagement with the hydrogen fuel cell industry and also communication with the end users and the fleet operators. These communities are the ones that are going to benefit the most from this technology. They're located right along the freight corridors, and they're the ones that can be the biggest advocates for the technology. So we need to educate them, assist them, and empower them to help make this transition to zero emissions. And hydrogen fuel cell technology is proven. It's proven through various demonstration projects, and now it's time to scale up to enable mass deployment. And to do that, there needs to be funding in place through policy designed specifically for heavy-duty and medium-duty vehicle rollout. That includes funding for infrastructure, which is an extremely important piece. There also needs to be an end-user incentive, something that they can see on their bottom line to help them transition away from carbon-intensive fuels such as diesel and move over to zero-emission technologies such as hydrogen fuel cell. Also, there needs to be a comprehensive multi-stakeholder state action plan for the development and deployment of medium and heavy-duty vehicles and infrastructure in the state of California. It was noted that the only perspective that we were missing from this workshop was from the energy utility companies, because they play a major role, especially when you're talking about getting into large-scale on-site hydrogen production through electrolysis. Next slide. So I'm going to say a quick thank you, and I'll move this over to Jacob Goldberg at the Port of Los Angeles. Take it away.
All right. Excuse me. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for the opportunity to be a part of this conversation. And I'd like to thank CHPC specifically for inviting us to be a part of the conversation, and looking forward to providing our point of view on the role hydrogen can play in the future of freight transportation. For those unfamiliar, a brief overview of the Port of Los Angeles. We're the nation's largest container port. Founded in 1907 as a department of the city of Los Angeles, and we operate as a landlord business model here, where we rent out the land to private entities that actually operate the facilities and handle the actual shipping through our terminals. We cover 7,500 acres of land and water, 43 miles of waterfront, with 27 cargo terminals. So if we're the landlord involved, we don't actually own any of this equipment or provide any of that service. What is our role here? Well, the impacts from our operations in our area are extremely significant, and this map here showcases the increase in air toxics risk in the Southern California air basin in the early 2000s, and that lovely dark brown purple area is the area around the ports of LA and Long Beach, and you can see the impacts along the freight corridors out east towards the Inland Empire. This mandate as we are the city entity in charge of this area, we are perceived as the responsible agency, and thus we are required to find a mechanism to move towards cleaner operations. To that end, this resulted in our Clean Air Action Plan, a joint document between us and the Port of Long Beach that outlines our strategies and goals for reducing air emissions from port operations. This is a broad document covering all source categories from the port, including the major ships, the trains coming in and out, and the harbor craft. But for the purposes of today's discussion with regards to the roles of hydrogen, I wanted to focus in on two of our primary goals in the plan, specifically that all terminal equipment that handles the container goods and other goods that come in and out of the port to be operating on zero emissions by the year 2030, and for all on-road drayage trucks that service the port to be zero emissions by 2035. In order to meet those goals under the Clean Air Action Plan, we have tasked ourselves with undergoing feasibility studies into the technologies in question on a every 3-year basis to determine their potential for widespread implementation. Can this given piece of technology be adopted by a fleet at wide scale in the near term? The first of those documents for the on-road trucks was released in April of this year, and the subsequent document on terminal equipment will be coming out in the coming weeks. But the conclusions with regards to zero emissions is that the current technologies assessed are not ready or feasible for widespread implementation today and are unlikely to be so within the next 3 years. And many of the reasons why the current models are not capable of doing the jobs that we believe them necessary to do could potentially be addressed by hydrogen technology. So what does hydrogen bring to the table that most of the current technologies can't quite handle? The first and foremost of that is the capability to continue operating at longer ranges, either literal distance or longer times of operation. Um, Given the current projections of hydrogen trucks, you can get upwards of 350 to 400 miles of operations on the current or the next planned models um, off a single fueling, and your fueling time, again, as was alluded in Corey's presentation, is much more comparable to your standard diesel options than the electric plugs and charge. Our port services, while there is a decent amount of traffic done near port, going back and forth between close warehouses or the near dock rail yards, a significant portion of our trucking fleet travels all the way out towards the Inland Empire areas, upwards of 60 or 70-mile routes, and even some goes further up into the central California Valley, out near Merced, up to 350-mile routes. And the current battery electric technologies simply can't get close to those distances, particularly while pulling a fully loaded container. As referenced, hydrogen offers a comparable driver experience to diesel when it comes to operating their truck. You have the same concerns as you do driving a diesel truck, and there's nothing extra. You've got a fuel gauge that runs down. Your fueling time is roughly what you're used to, and your range as you expect it to be. Whereas for battery electric vehicles, you have to worry about the amount of time it'll take to charge back up, and the fact that the heavier your load you're pulling, you'll be pulling down that battery charge faster. So you have to be keeping track of that as well, which is something the drivers currently aren't aware of. The expandability of hydrogen fueling infrastructure is also a key potential positive here, given that when you build a plug for a given truck, it's going to feed that one truck and use that entire footprint the entire time. Whereas the hydrogen fueling infrastructure has the capability to essentially mirror the current diesel models, and the throughput time should be able to be comparable as well, particularly as scales increase. And the final point, as was alluded to a little bit earlier, the actual vehicle weight of the projected current hydrogen models is comparable to your standard diesel options, both of which are significantly lighter than battery. When it comes to freight transportation, every pound that's in your vehicle is 1 pound less you can pull in your container, and that is a significant competitive challenge when it comes to the battery electric vehicles. That said, there are still some challenges for hydrogen technology to overcome in the near future, and we'd be remiss not to go over a couple of these. The first and foremost, of course, is that the actual equipment itself and the fuel is extremely expensive in comparison to all the other options today. Both the truck itself and the fuel required to move it are several times the cost of diesel, and is also significantly more expensive in comparison to the battery electric models. When we say the second bullet here that says unproven technology in heavy duty sector, it's referring specifically to port environments and these exact pieces of equipment. While the fuel cells themselves have been proven out in all kinds of various harsh environments, there is still a need to see them in operation as these duty cycles are expecting, both near port in the marine environments, and then just handling the steady routes and traffic that port service requires. The challenge behind infrastructure permitting is not unique to hydrogen per se, but the fact that many jurisdictions that would be installing new infrastructure are new to the hydrogen permitting game can be a challenge in and of itself, and finding ways to streamline that is a key. And finally, renewable generation is a very key point in moving this forward, particularly with the environmental justice communities. There are many views that hydrogen is formed via simply using steam methane reformation from natural gas and is not a mechanism towards zero emissions. So being able to demonstrate renewable generation at scale will be key moving forward. So all of this builds into the discussion that led to our current grant project that we were awarded last year through the California Air Resources Board, then their ZANZEF grant program. And forgive me for the acronym, it was not mine. Zero and near zero emission freight facilities grant solicitation was released last year, offering up to $150 million in major zero-emission projects or near zero-emission projects in California demonstrating freight movement. Actually, 205 million were awarded, and our project was awarded $41 million to demonstrate a connected shore-to-store system of moving containers from our terminals all the way to their end destination entirely on zero emissions. And the key here, the hydrogen elements to this discussion are we will be developing 10 hydrogen fuel cell Class 8 drayage trucks, building off those Toyota trucks that Corey mentioned in his presentation. Toyota is partnering with Kenworth to develop these alongside our timelines, and they will be deployed alongside 2 heavy-duty hydrogen filling stations, one near port in Wilmington, California, and one in the Inland Empire near Ontario's airport. The idea of providing that connected infrastructure and beginning to build out that network that will be necessary to truly transform the sector. The total project here is roughly $84 million, with $42 million coming from the partnership between the ports and our demonstration teams. By way of update as to where we are, the first 5 of these trucks are slated for deployment in the later part of this year towards November timeframes, the first of which is already undergoing testing at Kenworth's facility in Washington, and the others are all in various stages of building and deployment. These 5 will be put into service in Toyota's internal logistics services near the port area to learn from them and then build into the next set, which will go out towards 2 of which will go to TTSI, 3 of which to UPS, and will demonstrate the wider range capabilities. The Shell stations are in their final stages of permitting before breaking ground and should be operating in the later part of next year towards the September time frame. So wrapping up and looking forward, the future demonstrations such as our shore-to-store project and others in the area provide an opportunity to prove the technology's viability in the heavy-duty sector and again specifically in the ports environment. There is a general need to bring the cost of this equipment and the molecule itself down to be able to be cost competitive in the future. Many public funding opportunities can be leveraged to generate the necessary infrastructure network to take advantage of hydrogen's greater range. And then finally, expanding on renewable hydrogen generation will be a key towards moving the freight supply chain towards net zero carbon emissions in the future. So with that, I will conclude my little section of this presentation here, and we'll hand it off to Bill Zobel from Trillium to continue from there.
Thank you, Jacob. Okay, thanks for joining us this afternoon, everybody. A little bit about us. Trillium is a part of the Loves family of companies. We are the alternative fuels brand for Loves. Loves has about 450 travel stops across the U.S., and that number grows monthly. And as Trillium, we operate 225 alternative fuel sites, both that we own and operate at the Loves stops and for our customers at other locations. We're operating under the mantra these days that we can be one partner and provide any fuel to our customers. We provide a range of different fuels that cover a lot of our different business lines, and we're able to provide customers whatever they're looking for to meet their needs long term. To be able to do that effectively, we need to understand our customer base, which is important. We need to understand the products that we're offering, the costs, how reliable they are, what kind of deployment timelines are available for customers, what their sustainability goals are, location and scale. And all of these are things that need to be considered in the context of deployment of hydrogen infrastructure, which is likely the next phase of heavy-duty trucking. We take a customer-centric approach to this. We think it provides customers the best overall view of the market and gives them direction on where they're headed and helps us provide those needs. In particular, in the context of developing a new market like this one, we'll need to really start with a strategic outlook on what it is the customer wants to achieve and how they want to achieve it. We try to work with them to understand where they are on their goals, what kind of cost savings and efficiencies they expect, and then optimize their operating performance. To that end, we've got a service network that spans from coast to coast and operates our 220 stations at a very high level of reliability, which customers will always need in the commercial space. A little bit about our experience in hydrogen and one of the projects we built in the heavy duty sector. This is for a transit authority, OCTA, in Orange County, California. It is currently the largest heavy duty commercial hydrogen refueling facility in the United States. It was built and should be up and running here in the third quarter of 2019, so we're just getting that going now. It was actually designed for 50 heavy duty buses, and the system will actually start with 20, and they've got the opportunity to grow it up to 50. The system was designed to provide 30 kilograms a day of hydrogen fuel per vehicle with 6-minute fuel times with 2 dispensers running simultaneously. This operation is very familiar to the transit. They come in, they refuel, they go back and they park their trucks and move on. Very different from what some transits are looking at relative to battery electric bus deployments, where that will have a big impact on their operations and change the way they need to do things. The system itself will hold up to 1,500 will dispense up to 1,500 kilograms a day. It's got about a 3-day storage capacity. The footprint is fairly small. As you'll see on the next slide, it's on this rendering, it's a liquid delivery system. The customer wanted to go this route as opposed to an on-site SMR. There were a lot of considerations that went into that prior to the arrival on the scene, but this is the system we built for them, and we'll have it started up here in the third quarter of this year. We expect it to run very well and operate very reliably over the course of the next, what will be a 5-year contract we have with them, but this system should run for at least 10 to 12 years. The cost of this system was around $5 million to service this load. And we expect that with about another $2.5 million investment, or about another 50% investment, we could double the size of that facility pretty easily and have it operate up to 100 vehicles. In terms of some of the benefits and barriers that are facing us in the development of this market, many of these have been touched on by Corey and by Jacob already. I'll try not to be repetitive. Some of the things that we're trying to look at here, we implement these systems across the United States commercially for a lot of people. So we'll take a very commercial perspective to this, and I think Tony will have some things to add as well from a commercial perspective. The benefits, of course, are the zero tailpipe emissions associated with the fuel. That's a goal we have. Low carbon would also be nice to have with that. Using renewable fuels to generate that, or electrolysis, will certainly add value to the fuel long term. Cost effectiveness only comes with scale in hydrogen. I think what we're seeing in the battery electric market, if I can draw a comparison there, is that battery's easy to just start small. You can try a couple of these things out and see how it goes. Hydrogen really doesn't work that way. If you're going to make hydrogen work and work cost effectively, you're going to need to do it at scale. That's the only way you're going to get your fuel costs down. And eventually, when the market starts to mature, when we see heavy duty truck sales increase, we'll see prices come down with more competition for more product that's available into the marketplace. So we look forward to that. The technology is, as both Jacob and Corey mentioned, is improving. There are some folks putting together some OEM product now. Duty cycle, range, refueling speed, all of those are benefits that hydrogen enjoys that are similar to diesel or natural gas commercial operations today, and certainly what our customers will be looking for in terms of making this product work in the forward years. That said, there are certainly a share of barriers out there. I mean, we are developing a new market here with hydrogen. It will be a challenge, as it was with natural gas, and I'll draw some comparisons later relative to that. But there are ways we can go about it, and we can learn from mistakes we made in the past and try not to repeat them in the future. OEM product is not widely available at this time, but we expect more OEMs to come into the fore as demand for the product increases. Infrastructure, of course, is a challenge. We don't have any of it in the heavy duty sector now. We're going to have to start developing that. I've got some slides to talk about that in just a moment. And again, these deployments require scale incentives if we're going to get to a level of commercialization. Specifically to incentives, I think one of the things that we're definitely going to need is that we improve upon the policies that we put forward in the past, and we'll need something that's more consistent going forward to allow for private capital to come into the market and make the investments that are necessary to grow this market out. We'll need something that's very steady in terms of incentives. We'll need something that's dedicated. We'll need something tied to the total cost of ownership of the vehicle, and something that's flexible enough to adjust as we go and allow for changes in cost of fuel, technology, the variable spread between the traditional fuel you're trying to replace, et cetera, et cetera. So all things I think we've learned in this last go around that we need to apply in the next go around. In terms of making it work and building this market, if it's going to take hold, we need to use those learnings that we developed in CNG. The initial focus and product deployments, limited infrastructure, return to base operations, dedicated lanes will be the best place for us to start. I've got some slides on those in just a minute. We'll show some ideas on how that might all come together. Jacob touched on it a bit when he talked about the port opportunity and how they're looking at some dedicated lanes within some of the highly concentrated air pollution areas in Los Angeles. It's certainly a great way to start. And then fuel production and logistics need to be built out, but they need to be built out at scale, and they need to be built out with contracts. It's going to be very difficult to do this on spec, and we certainly can't expect the state to pay for everything. So there's got to be some public-private partnership or share there between private capital and public funds to get this market developed. For policymakers, they should help us focus on leveling the playing field, and that means a lot of things. You know, we go back to total cost of ownership. That's going to be important to get somebody into these new trucks. All those total cost of ownership variables need to be tied into real-world commercial economics. We can't be picking and choosing studies that provide the best answers for us and use that because we think that's the way it works. Working with fleets like Tony's and working with Jacob down at the port, other folks within the Hydrogen Business Council that understand real-world commercial economics and how they apply will be important to setting up these incentive programs to push things forward. Regulatory certainty will absolutely be key. We will not ever be successful developing this market if these programs are on again, off again. You know, this year we've got $10 million, next year we've got $2 million. We need some steady flow of incentive money and a runway to understand what's in front of us and where we can invest capital to get adequate returns to grow the market. Lastly, I think it's worth considering a multi-state approach. While we're looking, what's been shown here, I think earlier, has been more of a regional approach to getting this market started, which is probably wise. Commercial freight doesn't necessarily worry about crossing state lines. So it may be worth at some juncture for policymakers to look at a multi-state compact that allows us to share the benefits and share the cost of growing this network over a much larger area that will help us to grow out some freight lanes between states to help the market progress. Just some ideas on how to set that up. For those of us that have been around for some time, we may recall back in the day there was, back in 2009, 2010, the original natural gas corridor ran from Los Angeles into Salt Lake City. It was a program funded by TARP money, I believe, from the federal government. It involved the folks that sponsored this webinar at GNA. They did a great job pulling that together, and some other big freight companies. And that was really the kickstart of a large product order, a commercial lane that was going to operate this way, and got things moving in the Western states in terms of commercializing that initial market. Something similar to that with the players in the space that run any number of these lanes, and these are just examples, would certainly be a good way to get infrastructure developed, ensure that infrastructure is used so that those who invest in that infrastructure can get a positive return, and that the folks that run trucks along those lanes have a place to get fuel at a cost they know and understand. While this has been discussed a little bit, there are some regional markets that we should be looking at as well. These primarily relate to return to base operations. There are large pockets in California and other states that move a lot of freight between facilities that return to base at night. So projecting infrastructure and developing out these regional markets is also another way to get this program off and running. So with that, I will turn it over to Tony.
Thanks, Bill. All right. Good afternoon, and we are pleased to share our experience with the Class 8 fuel cell trucks. We are a third-party logistics company headquartered in Rancho Dominguez, California, where we manage the import and export of ocean containers. We started in 1989 as an air freight company, but quickly moved to drayage and incorporated in 1997. We operate in all the major ports in the United States, either directly or indirectly. Our services consist of drayage, warehousing, over-the-road transportation, brokerage. We are asset-owned and contracted for its power and equipment. It's either owned or leased our own chassis or van trailers. This is our sustainability statement. We are committed to leaving the smallest footprint. Our statement is threefold. Number one, we want to operate a zero-emission fleet. Number two, while servicing our customers. And number three, while being a good steward of the environment. That's our statement. This shows some of the awards that we've won over the past years. We were the first company to convert our fleet 100% with the introduction of the Clean Air Action Program in 2007 and 2009. We won various awards. 2011, we was also the first company to place a Class 8 hydrogen fuel cell truck into drayage operation. That's the truck at the bottom picture. And then in 2019, we won the California Air Quality Award. This slide here shows our commitment to being clean fleet. This here was the press conference of the introduction of the Clean Air Action Program in 2007 with the mayors of LA and Long Beach. And the picture to your right is our CEO President, Vic LaRosa, announcing that we will convert our fleet to 100% to comply with the divisions of the CAP. This next slide shows the acceptance of the first Class 8 hydrogen fuel cell truck from Vision Motors. The picture to your left shows the truck, Class 8. Very nice truck. It performed very well. Pictures at the top is our CEO, President Vic LaRosa, accepting the keys from Martin Swarton with Vision Motors. And the picture at the bottom right is our president again at a press conference with the city of Long Beach announcing the truck. This slide here represents our duty cycle in the ports of Los Angeles and Long Beach. We operate 6 days per week, Monday through Friday, anywhere from 20 to 22 hours, running dual shifts. On Fridays and Saturdays, we have one shift operating 10 hours. Our operational need is Class 8 zero-emission trucks. We do not operate Class 7 trucks. We need the power of these trucks to transport loads anywhere from 36 to 39,000 pounds. Trucks must be reliable, dependable, able to travel a grade of 6% at a minimum speed of 30 to 35 miles an hour. Minimum fueling time, we would same time as diesel, around 15 to 20 minutes, and then available fueling structure in the areas that we serve. This here slide shows the map complex of Port of Los Angeles on the left and Port of Long Beach on the right. The Port of LA has 7 terminals we serve. The Port of Long Beach has 5, a total of 12 terminals. If you look on the slide on your left, there's a red X. That's where we're domiciled, our trucks. So based off this map and our location, we can be at any port, at any terminal in the port complex within 5 to 20 minutes, just depending on the traffic flow. This slide here shows our drayage operation in Southern California. If you look down on the left side, 88% of our loads are moved from 2 to 15 miles, and then the other 12% is moved to the end of the empire, and that's anywhere from 64 to 72 miles one way. These are pictures of the trucks that we currently have in operation. The top left is US Hybrid. We're operating 2 Class 8 fuel cell trucks. The bottom left is the Kenworth fuel cell truck. The top right is TransPower. We're currently operating 2 trucks. The bottom right is truck number 1. The top right is truck number 1. and the bottom right is truck number 2. We're currently operating truck number 2. We look to get truck number 1 back at any time now. And this is our operational experience of the fuel cell trucks over the past year. Regulatory is, 0 greenhouse gases, no island, low noise pollution. Operational, these trucks have substantial torque. We have not heard any complaints about being able to move containers. The drivers are beginning to accept that. I'll expand on that later. And the duty cycle of these fuel cell trucks are beginning to match our operation. Now, our concerns are the purchase cost of the trucks. Even though these are demo trucks, we know sooner or later these trucks are going to go to market, and we will need to know what is the cost of these trucks. Currently, a Class 8 day cab truck is about $140,000 out the door. So what is the cost of a fuel cell truck going to come in? Also, you got to look at the insurance costs. With the insurers out there insure this vehicle, probably one of the negative points of hydrogen fuel cells is they believe it would explode. Having been in the environmental industry for years now, this is probably one of the safest products for its fuel out there on the road. You have to look at the fuel costs. Currently, 2 weeks ago, I looked at the price of hydrogen in Southern California, and it's $16.99 a kilogram. Diesel right now is $3 and I believe 87 cents. So there's a big jump in fuel costs. And then also you got to look at the service and repair costs. The cost of these components, even though they're in demo, are very high. When you put these out to production and have to replace these components, what is going to be the cost to replace them? If you look at operation, the tare weight of the fuel cell trucks is weigh a little bit more than the conventional day cab. A 2017 Freightliner weighs about 15,800 pounds. We have some of these demonstration trucks coming in around 23,000 to 24,000 pounds, and that's due to battery weights and other components on the truck. Another operation is fuel infrastructure. We operate with our own on-site fueling structure, which is excellent for our operation, but some carriers or companies won't have that luxury because of zoning laws or zoning policies. And then the battery life. What is the battery life of these trucks? Is it 3, 5, 7 to 8 years? And with the frequent charging and discharging the batteries, how long is the battery on these trucks going to stand? This slide here shows you the list of some of the vehicles that we're demonstrating now and our future trucks we'll be receiving over the next few months. Currently, we have 4 trucks in operation, and by start of second quarter of next year, we will have a total of 11 hydrogen fuel cell trucks we'll be demonstrating. This slide here shows our fueling station on site. We are permitted for 500 kilograms. We currently have 300 kilograms on site, 2 150 fuelers, self-contained. Fuel time right now on the truck is about 20 to 25 minutes. The picture to your left shows the fueling a U.S. hybrid truck. Our supply of hydrogen is supported by Air Products, which is less than 5 miles from our site. And then the takeaway from our experiences, when we look at the fuel cell technology, we believe, TTSI, we're moving in the right direction with heavy duty technology. We see a positive trend in this technology. We got new players in the heavy duty game, the OEMs and the integrators. are stepping up and listening to the end users of what is actually needed for the duty cycle. Downtime is reduced and the issues are resolved quickly. In the past, it's been more of a, well, we have to bring the truck back and check it out. But now when the truck goes down, we give a call to the supporting technology. And they call and tell us that, okay, we're going to do this. And through a computer, they're able to get the truck up and running. So that is great. And another thing, our drivers and operators, they're accepting the technology. A few years back, you couldn't pay a guy to get in these trucks because, number one, it doesn't start up like a diesel. And number two, they turn the key and it's like, oh, the truck won't start. Well, there's no sound, so they're not used to that. So they're beginning to understand how to operate these fuel cell trucks. Even when they are assigned these trucks and they go out and get a load, either the delivering in 5 or 10 miles, they understand how to operate that truck. They know how much capacity they have to move certain loads. So they're beginning to figure this out. A couple other things that the drivers have informed us about the fuel cell is, number one, it's very quiet. They like the less noise that it makes. Number two, there's less vibration in the cab. They're not shaking around the cab as they do in a diesel truck. And the biggest part is that at the end of the day, they go home and their clothes don't smell like diesel. That's been one of the biggest advantages of the fuel cell truck. And with that, I will turn it back over to Emmanuel.
All right, thank you very much, and thank you to all the panelists for your presentations. Very much appreciated all the information that was shared here. And I know this is not everything that people are looking for, because we have about 300 attendees, but we have over 80 questions, and in the remaining 8 minutes, I don't think we're going to get to all of them. But I do want to make sure that we address a few questions. One set of questions that I think we can address pretty quickly is related to cost. It comes related to, so actually this one is a good one. Can we expect the hydrogen fuel cost to come down, or the fuel cell stack technology to improve, allowing for more mileage for less hydrogen and therefore also less cost? So this, I don't know if any of the presenters can talk to that directly, but from our experience from industry feedback that we've received is that the major OEM in the light duty in the sector, Toyota, has announced that their next fuel cell electric vehicle will actually increase the range from 312 miles, which is the current Mirai range, to 434 miles. And they're looking at a range of 621 miles by 2025 for the third generation FCEV. So there's significant range improvements and fuel cell improvements expected. And the same kind of goes with fuel cost reduction, which is usually a factor of scale. The more hydrogen is needed in one area, the cheaper it actually gets, because you can scale up the production. And so, Shell has some data on that, which we can send a link around in the follow-up. But a big driver, a big cost reduction driver is really scale up, as I think Bill and others have alluded to. So bringing vehicles to the market and bringing that demand to market really will help reduce the cost. So that's one initial comment. I'm going to ask Jacob just what are the plans for the port related to hydrogen infrastructure, equipment, procurement, or incentives in terms of what's next? What can people expect?
Sure. So outside of the ongoing demonstration project that I alluded to earlier, siting for hydrogen infrastructure, at least on port property, is an extreme challenge just because of the lack of available real estate. If there's a square inch of land available at the port, it's probably being used, and if it isn't, there's a reason why. So there's nothing specific I can point to with regards to hydrogen infrastructure in the area. That said, we are, as referenced, the need to bring the cost down of hydrogen is a key focus here, and the uptick in renewable generation is also a key element to what the port views as necessary for hydrogen moving forward. So we're looking into mechanisms that we can use to help expand on that. And then just to answer the point about equipment procurement, as a reminder that the port doesn't actually own any of the equipment that truly operates here, so the equipment procurement is up to our terminals. If and when they choose to purchase something new, they'll let us know what infrastructure they need from us, and we will accommodate as any landlord would.
Yeah, thank you, Jacob. A question to both Tony and Corey. This is related to fuel cell performance. Can you discuss fuel cell sensitivity to factors like being parked for the weekend, short periods based on demand for freight movement, as well as reliability in sort of harsh environments like cold?
I'll let Tony talk about the parked for the weekend, but I'll just want to address the cold environment for a moment. There's been a number of tests in extreme cold environments for light-duty vehicles, and also one of the advantages of using a fuel cell forklift is its ability to operate with the same performance in extreme cold and such as refrigerated warehouses. But go ahead, Tony.
For the startup over a weekend, there's been no issues. They get in the truck on Monday after the truck sits from Saturday afternoon to through Sunday, and the truck starts right up. So there's no issue with the truck sitting or any type of special procedures to start the truck after it's been sitting. No issue.
And that's one of the advantages. Oh, sorry, go ahead. I got one comment on that.
I was going to say, as for the cold weather, we don't have that issue here in Southern California, so I really can't speak to that.
Right.
Sorry, Tony, I got excited for a second. I just want to point out that there's no degradation over time with the hydrogen storage. So you can leave a hydrogen tank filled in a car, in a truck, in a bus. You can come back to it theoretically a year later, and you have the exact same amount. So that's one of the advantages over a battery.
And Corey, you would know with your extensive travel overseas that your FCV actually does stand around for a little while from time to time. Question to Bill. Does Trillium provide multiple fuels at a single facility, or is it different stations for one or more fuel? Oh, and Bill, you may be muted. Oh, it looks like we may have lost Bill. Okay, well, see if you can jump back in just a second while maybe figuring out how to unmute himself. So one question here related to, so we covered in the presentation from Jacob some funding mechanisms, initiatives, and funding that's available in California. He has a question related to federal government initiatives and the funding available from the federal government to accelerate hydrogen adoption, like tax credit rebates, etc. And for the most part, unlike some of our other zero-emission vehicle technologies, there's very little incentives and funding available. FCEVs don't have a tax credit right now. There are, I'm not quite sure if any of you, like Tony or Bill, do you know of any federal funding that is available for project development or vehicle rollout?
I've not heard any at this point.
Yeah. I realize that we may. Oh, Bill, is that you?
That was Jacob. That there, as far as our understanding is concerned, there isn't like a standing fuel cell vehicle incentive, particularly at the federal level. That said, here in the state, California Resources Board has some standing money in their HVIP program that does require the truck to be considered a commercial product. So if and when that truck is ready and available, there is some incentive money here in California. And I'm aware that the Department of Energy and the Department of Transportation have independently funded projects in the past, but that's on a per project basis, not as a standing program.
Right. Thank you, Jacob. Okay, one question related to another concern, and certainly in California, how much of the current hydrogen supply is renewable? So for the light-duty transportation sector, we can always cite the Air Resources Board, which just recently actually came out with the 2019 program, and they say 39% of hydrogen in California is made from renewable sources. And in parts of, I think it's mostly in the LA area, or you can probably confirm that, but there are, I believe, about 5 stations that are 100% renewable. So there is the option to just fuel your car with entirely renewable hydrogen. But it is one of the most renewable transportation fuels in California right now. I'm not quite sure how that translates into the heavy duty sector or the port sector. Is there a commitment, a strong renewable commitment in that sector right now, or any requirements? Go ahead.
I can speak to that for our demonstration project anyway. Under the ZANZEF grant requirement, any hydrogen fueling under that grant is required to be at least 33% renewably sourced. So we're certainly going to hit that minimum. And as I've mentioned, this is a key focus from the Port of LA's perspective with regards to moving hydrogen forward. So we're certainly looking to find ways to expand that number and hopefully take that higher. But there's at least a minimum of a third of the hydrogen coming into that facility and being used there must be renewable.
Right. No, I appreciate that. Thank you, Jacob. And just to also kind of emphasize that building the infrastructure is a major focus. But hydrogen itself, even coming from natural gas SMR, is already cleaner than diesel. So while it's not the cleanest fuel, it certainly is already cleaner, and there are pathways to go to higher and higher amounts of renewable over time once costs come down as well. That's always the other part. So we are about 2 minutes after the hour, and I see we are losing a few folks. One last question to, I would say, the entire panel. Hopefully Bill is back. What are the top 3 activities industry and government must do collaboratively to make this application succeed? Maybe Tony, Jacob, and Bill, and Corey, if you want to then round it out. In your opinion, what are the top 3 activities that industry and government must do collaboratively to make this application succeed?
I'll go first. I believe that there need to be more research money out there for the hydrogen fuel cell, but I believe this is a good return on investment. If the research dollars are out there, the OEMs and the integrators can go out and they can really start testing these fuel cells in the market. That's what I believe. There just needs to be a little bit more government support in research because I think the cost could be a strain on a business or a company.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks, Tony. Go ahead, Jacob.
To pick up from there, I'll just tack on that I think we've alluded to all of the major challenges here. That the biggest key will be showcasing the scale production of the actual equipment itself, expanding the infrastructure to be able to support that, and renewable generation would be the top 3 points that I would like to lay out.
Okay, thank you, Jacob. Oh, go ahead.
No, I can harp on those points exactly. I think that the collaboration needs to be for a larger scale deployment, and especially on the renewable hydrogen side. I think we need to start to do more production of renewable hydrogen to really bring home the value proposition that this is a zero emissions vehicle from, well to wheels. And there needs to be specific incentives for the end user. As Tony alluded to, the costs are high right now. And so the government should continue to step up and provide financial incentives for the end user. And also another point there is to provide perhaps mandates on number of zero emission vehicles, which is coming up in California.
Yeah, thank you, Corey. And I see Bill actually answered via text here. Bill says his 3 priorities are to first establish a clear path forward that focuses incentives on commercial economics, The second is to focus on regional centers and corridors that develop infrastructure for commercial fleets. And the last one, to not make the perfect be the enemy of the good. And with that, I really appreciate everybody's time and for staying longer than we originally scheduled. We again want to remind you of the survey that takes about 30 seconds to take once you close out of the webinar. We really appreciate your feedback. And as already answered throughout the chat box, a recording of the webinar will be posted online, and you will be notified by the end of the week for when it's going to be available and you can access it. So with that, I really appreciate all of your participation today, your questions. We'll review the questions and see, make sure that we try to answer as many as we can. Apologies that we couldn't get to all of them. Again, you know, we had a lot of attendees and a lot of questions, so apologies for not getting to all of them. Thank you for participating, and hopefully we see you at the next webinar with ACT and CHPC. Thank you.